So while Congressman Murphy's putting on his mic, many of you know that we honored him at the Lifesavers Gala in May in New York, and Nancy Farrell and I had the good fortune to sit on either side of him, and we had a thoroughly delightful evening. It turns out that there was 3 Irish folks getting together, telling jokes back and forth. So to remind you, Dr. Murphy, these are field advocates from all 50 states. We're going to be visiting the Hill tomorrow. They know that you are our American hero, that you, for many years now, have borne the burden of researching the whole mental health system in the country, and that they are very happy that the 21st Century Cures legislation included your legislation. They know it's just the opening act. So I have a couple questions for you, and then we're going to take some questions from the audience. They're going to write their questions down on index cards, okay, and then I will go through them. So we know you so well. You've often lamented that while the federal government dedicates $130 billion towards mental health, the so-called mental health system is best described by its deficits. Can you share your thoughts on this with our advocates? By the way, Dr. Murphy is a psychologist, so half the group is new and half the group has been here before, so why don't you give them a little background on who you are? And
so yes, I'm a psychologist, been practicing since 1970. Over 40 years. I currently serve in the Navy. In fact, today I was on Navy duty, so I was in my Navy uniform about an hour and a half ago.
I've often seen you when you come back to the office with your uniform.
You salute me, that's good. It's funny because when I come in the building, they say, "Sir, you have to show an ID," so I have to remind the Capitol Police. But I work on a unit at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center at Bethesda. That's a TBI, traumatic brain injury, PTSD unit. And many of our patients are people who have attempted or in fact, I was talking with someone today. He says, "I'm going to tell you a story about suicide, but it's not ideation, so please don't write that down in the chart. I just want to tell you that everybody gets pensive and wonders about it in life." But also people who had an attempt at suicide with a gunshot wound or something, or something else, and survived it. So it's a topic near and dear to me. I've written a couple books. One's called The Angry Child. Either you're an angry child, you know someone, or you want your guide to Congress, buy the book, read it. And if that doesn't take it, I wrote another book called Overcoming Passive Aggression, which I gave a copy to the president. I wrote in there, "This is your guide to Congress." So he takes a quick, "Let's get a photo." So he holds the book up. He says, "Get over here." He says, "This is going to be a huge success." So overcoming passive aggression. So my work in this, I should say, at least in terms of how we got started in Congress. When I first ran for state senate, it was work on healthcare reforms and education issues. It's not a lot of psychologists do this. And then running for Congress, I always felt I'm at the bottom of the waterfall when it gets a little damaging. I wanted to be at the top to try and prevent some things. And a lot of those related to work I did in newborn intensive care units, working with babies, tiny babies born addicted then in the 90s to crack cocaine. And now you have a lot of neonatal abstinence syndrome issues too with babies. I'm on the Energy and Commerce Committee, which covers health. It should be Energy, Commerce, and Health. And on that, I'm a member of the Health Subcommittee, the Environment Subcommittee, and I chair the Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigation. And that's where this came from. When I was appointed chairman of that, I began a series of investigative hearings on what's going on with mental health. Now, of course, I had colleagues say, "You don't get into that, Murphy. That's maybe do one, but that's it." But what really happened is the terrible tragedy at Sandy Hook Elementary School occurred. And people talk about the massacre, the murders of those children and teachers, but rarely do they mention the suicide of the perpetrator. And in so many of these instances, it's a murder-suicide event. And when a person is to that level of mental illness where they're willing to take their own life and life is not meaningful for them, we have to find out why. So some of my colleagues were saying, "Let's talk about the guns and how many bullets in a magazine and what the gun looks like." I said, "Can we talk about what's going on in their minds and not just focus on what's in their hands?" And so we had a series of hearings. I think we were in 20 different cities in 14 states. We literally went through millions of Facebook, social media postings, other things, thousands of letters, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of phone calls. And it was the people of America that wrote this bill. By the way, I need to give credit to my staff because I appreciate you giving me the award that you did before, but Scott Jangelski, Brad Grants, Susan Moseychuk, Carly, who handles my press now. There's a number of people that really did a lot of work on this bill, and I hope someday that you recognize them for their work. Because it was a brutal, brutal process.
It was.
Because when we're dealing with the stigma of mental illness, people don't want to talk about it. Like, can we talk about something else? This is tough to do. In fact, colleagues came up to me and even said, we can pass this bill. Do you mind compromising? And I said, we need something big. We need something comprehensive. This bill is called the biggest overhaul in the mental health system since 1963, 50 years. And literally one colleague says, can you just compromise? And I said, well, why would I compromise? Well, then you get a bill with your name. And I said, that's not my goal. My goal is to get this passed into law. And again, this person advised, yes, but you're willing to compromise. Just take parts of it. You can still get it done. So I said, I don't know if you have a son or a daughter, but if I'm the psychologist for your child, and I said, your child has some serious mental illness, and I know what it takes to help him or her, but how about if instead of doing what it takes, we compromise? And I just do about 10% of the treatment needed. Would you be okay with that? To which this person said, put me on as a co-sponsor. So that's what it takes. So back to your question about this $130 billion, it was staggering when we found out, because we asked the General Accounting Office, I think, tell us how much we spend on programs with serious mental illness. 60 million Americans in any given year with some diagnosable from the very minor things that we all experience, to severe depression, severe schizophrenia, psychosis, schizoaffective disorder. 10 million people with severe mental illness, 4 million of them get no treatment at all. And many of those with mild to moderate mental illness also get no treatment. We said, how much does the federal government spend? I was amazing, $130 billion. Now, most of that is on disability payments, where they say, here's your check, and there's no comma, there's no period, just here's your check. There's no services, there's no thing like, we'll give you money for your disability, but we want to help you out of this. There was just simply no hope for people. And we also found out in the context, we're not paying for providers. We have an absolute desert of providers. Half the counties in America, no psychiatrists, no psychologists, no social workers. And we're finding it's even worse if you're looking for someone who's a drug and alcohol counselor. We know the numbers this year of the number of people who die of a drug overdose will now exceed the names on the Vietnam Memorial Wall. 1 year.
Yeah.
59,000 or so. I think there's 58,000 names on that wall. By the way, the number of suicides this year equal to if you filled every seat in Baltimore's Camden Yards Stadium.
Right.
But it doesn't register for people because suicide is one at a time. A mass attack we respond to, but one at a time, and they're usually silent and they're hidden and families don't talk about it. Although I like it now when you read the obituaries, people are starting to talk about it.
Right.
My son, John, died of, he killed himself, and here's, help out. This is very, very important. But the federal government, no one was asking where the money goes. It was amazing to me. So we found programs out there that, to this day, still gets me going. So programs on, we have people dying. So 350,000 people died last year, mental health-related problems, primary or secondary. So, because severe mental illness, you also tend to die 10 to 25 years sooner. Chronic illnesses, 75% have one chronic illness, 50% have at least two, a third have at least three. And the way the medical system's set up, they don't coordinate behavioral medicine and physical medicine. So people don't think, hey, maybe the mental illness is making their physical illness worse, and maybe when you get a diagnosis of a chronic illness, you're more prone towards these things. We know that's true, but we don't have it. So what happens is we found that this agency called SAMHSA, Substance Abuse Mental Services Administration, had beliefs that schizophrenia was only non-consensus reality in terms of delusions and hallucinations. What the hell is that? They didn't believe it was real. They believed it was only caused by trauma. You could treat it with fish oil. That if they had recipes on making fruit smoothies if you're stressed. They had workshops on how to get off your medication. They had workshops on getting in touch with your inner animal, making masks, interpretive dancing. It was absurd. And it maintained a 1960s era concept that, just give them something and they'll get better. And protect their right to refuse treatment, or what I call their right to be sick as opposed to their right to be well. The number of hospital beds continues to decline, and the federal government was looking at ways to cut that even more. Giving medication to people continues to be a problem with CMS, because they think we can save money if we don't pay for all these drugs. So they just want to do like one antipsychotic and one antidepressive. So we had a hearing on this, and I asked the person from CMS, Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, I said, I know you're trying to save money here, but when you have things like SSRIs, et cetera, they can have different side effects. And the side effects determine if someone wants to take them. Plus, you can only take them sometimes if you have another drug, you take them in combination, it's not going to work. So what good is a drug if someone doesn't take them? You can spend as little as you want, but if someone's not taking or they get the prescription filled and they sit in their counter, what good is that? And to this, I even had him read a letter out loud from the American Psychiatric Association questioning that. And we said the word SSRI. I said, by the way, do you know what SSRI is? And he said, I wasn't briefed on that. He said, I wasn't briefed on that. I said, but you're making a decision on that. A serotonin reuptake inhibitor. You're making a decision on antipsychotics. And these are people floundering out there without treatment, without beds, without providers, without prescriptions, or places providers prescriptions. And where is all this money going? And it was just a black hole. And on top of that, 112 federal agencies that don't talk to each other across 8 departments. So we have services out there, but they're all siloed. There's 26 homeless programs the federal government funds. Why do we need more than 2? And why is the money here in some cubicle instead of giving someplace for a person to lay their head? And that person, they may give up hope. So this was the frontal attack we did. And believe me, there was a lot of resistance. As you know, you were in the trenches with us from the onset.
We were.
People saying, back off, don't do this. Because when you start to shake up people's paradigms and way of thinking, they want to protect it.
Right.
And we would simply raise a few things as well. If you're doing so good, then an era where the mortality rate has gone down for cancer, for heart disease, for lung disease, for AIDS, for accidental deaths, all declines. But for suicides, it's gone up. For substance abuse overdose deaths, both are rocketing. I see that as a sign of abysmal failure. So that's what we found, and that just stoked our fires to work harder.
So the good news is your legislation was attached to the 21st Century Cures.
Well, you say that it passed the House 422-2. We got to say that, too.
Okay.
We don't see success like that.
We do. And remind our advocates, what was the vote on that?
Yeah, 422-2 in the House. And then
what was that vote again?
And the 2, those guys don't vote for anything, so it's okay. They don't believe the federal government should be involved in anything.
So tell us the major provisions.
The major provisions, it starts at the top, an Assistant Secretary of Mental Health and Substance Abuse. That's still a little debate about who that's going to be. I'm not happy with some of the picks, but that's going to be important because that person's job is to coordinate these 112 agencies and provide accountability and reports to Congress what's going on. We fund some of the suicide programs that have already been authorized. We want to authorize those again. We coordinate these agencies and have a mental health policy lab of people who are consumers, family members, and professionals who will now help set the policies instead of having these goofy, wasteful ideas going on. We also have, of these 8 departments and these agencies, they have to work together. They have to meet on a regular basis. We have money in there for training more providers. One of the areas we have that's absolutely embarrassing is the number of minority providers is awful. We know there's an important identity, a cultural identity you need, whether it's gender, race, preferences, whatever that is, it's very, very important. But in our prisons, the Black and Latino populations are far, far overrepresented, maybe double the population. 80% of the people with mental illness in prison get no treatment at all. And I think it's like 3 or 4% of psychiatrists are Hispanic and 2 or 3% are Black.
And the bedrock of your legislation was to have a new assistant secretary to elevate
it all.
Not just literally, but metaphorically, right?
We elevate,
and look at all the programs, evaluate them, right? And figure out, because before we can go back, I remember your very first hearing, John, if I know we need more money, but if we can't tell absolutely where the money's being spent, and is it being spent effectively, I can't go to my colleagues and ask for more money. Right?
Yeah, it's hard to go to colleagues and ask for money when someone's using it to literally to make coloring books.
Exactly.
While people are suffering. So, oh, by the way, they also had a crisis hotline you could call and a website during the 2014-2015 winter if you lived in New England and you had snow anxiety. Now, I'm a believer, if you have a crisis hotline for suicide prevention, a human being should answer that in the first ring and says, can I help you? Oh, do you get a transfer? No, I'm the one. But we were manning crisis hotlines if you were upset about the snow in Boston.
Wow.
That's how perverse.
And we have some Boston folks here that can tell you about
Boston?
snow. Yeah.
Who's from Boston? Has it ever snowed there? You okay? You okay with that? Snows in Pittsburgh. How about them Penguins, huh?
Hey, how about... All right.
Where's our
I know
Nashville
your
people
schedule
here?
is tight, so
Yes.
all of our people are going to the Hill tomorrow.
Yeah.
We know these are interesting times, right, to be a member of the House. We're going to visit all 435 or all 434 of your voting House members plus the delegates, and we're going to visit all 100 Senate offices. What is your takeaway for our advocates as they go into the offices?
Here's a few things. Number one, stick to your mission. I was once talking to a bunch of psychologists, and they're all wearing campaign prints of who's running for president. I said, if you're going to even think of wearing that, get out of the office because they'll see right through it.
Right.
Focus on your mission, not the politics, whatever that is. Other things will be worked out. You're just here in this mission. You're here to save lives one at a time, okay? Here's what we need to do. We need to make sure that the things that we authorize in this bill are paid for. So, so some of the suicide programs, some of the other funding for mental health services, and getting more providers. But a key thing too is also the IMD exclusion. Now,
Why don't you explain that briefly for
the
people that
IMD
don't?
exclusion, the Institute of Mental Diseases, is limits the number of hospital beds for someone on Medicaid to 16. So you're between the ages of 22 and 64, they'll only allow 16 beds in a hospital. So I was thinking, hey, is this how we can cure cancer? Just think about this. We just eliminate oncology centers. What a great idea. So it's really a very sick way of doing it.
Right.
So we just got to say drop
No
that. And I
pun
was talking
intended.
with Seema Verman and asked members of Congress, would you support something that would drop that? So we're going to reintroduce that version of the bill again and get some support in that. And also authorize appropriations for our parts of our bill that have more providers to them too. Those are some key features. Now, you may actually encounter some people who say, well, what does Tim Murphy want to do? Because I nag them to death. They'd see me coming and say, he's coming to talk about mental health again, which is okay. I want them to have that. But here's what I want you to do. Tell them your stories. And don't be afraid to say, has this touched your life too? Because many people won't admit it, but I'm telling you, I can't think of too many colleagues that hasn't touched as well. And you may even say, what do you think would have made a difference for your child, your spouse, your cousin, your niece, nephew, your friend? And sometimes you'll draw it out of them that you've got to have access for treatment. There should be a place people can go. We should not write it off in despair. We should not ignore those things. So those are some points. You may have a legislative agenda as well, but
Well, I think, again, we are talking about preserving access to mental health services, essential health benefits, and we know that there's some different...
let me describe that thing, because that's very
why don't you
important, because
talk
I
about
fought
that?
to get that back on. So yes, say as essential health benefit, it's essential. And here's an important part of that elevator speech, that for a person with a chronic physical illness, when they get that diagnosis, their chances of having depression, anxiety, panic disorders doubles.
Correct.
Untreated depression and a chronic illness doubles the cost. When you get that diagnosis, diabetes, heart disease, lung disease, whatever it is, cancer, some places will immediately screen for a depression screen or potential depression screen and immediately refer to a psychiatrist, psychologist, and immediately begin services. They tend to see it may not cure the disease, but it keeps them out of the hospital. With a general cost savings about 40%. So remember numbers like that. It says it actually saves money to integrate physical and behavioral medicine together, and give them and cite them something like that. A person with a chronic illness is far more likely to have a depression. Untreated depression costs more. And the flip of that's true too. A person with mental illness, what I said before, 75% have at least one chronic illness, 50% at least two, and 33% at least three. But when you treat both at the same time, you improve that person's life. We want to get them back to quality of life. So let them know it's actually a cost savings. I've talked to some governors about this, and they don't have any idea what I'm talking about. 5% of people on Medicaid, 5% are responsible for 55% of all Medicaid spending. It's amazing. And why? Because we're not taking care of the whole person.
Exactly.
And so what you see for this organization is a lot of people say, I'm just going to give up. And they don't have to give up. You can see them through.
We actually had somebody from the National Governors Association here to talk about their opioid roadmap.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're going to lay out some collaboration with them. So we're real excited. I know you've got to go. Are there any questions that people have written down on some index cards? People are pumped up. We've had about 1,000 people watching us all day on live stream. Carl Rove was here as was David Axelrod.
Yeah, so it's touched their lives as well.
Yeah, and they were phenomenal. Don't you think? They were just,
good.
they
And look at how you brought them together.
yeah, that was the first time, I believe, Bob, that they had been talking about it for years.
But look how you completely take away the politics of this. I mean, I've
Exactly.
treated in my life 10, 20, 30,000 patients, I don't know. But I can never remember I never asked anybody what party they belong to, and I don't frankly care. Do any of you-
Carl said hello because when Nancy and I spoke to him on the phone and told him about your award in New York, do you have a videotape of that? And we said, we have pictures. But so he said he knows you from way back.
Yeah.
And
Did
they
he want
made
to steal my jokes?
No. But they were pretty good. I mean, renewed my faith. And one of the reasons you're an American hero to us is because you keep on the straight and narrow and you focus on the picture. Like you said, our organization, you know full well, we have a big tent.
Mm-hmm.
We had people that supported the Donald. We had people that supported the Burn and everybody in between. And that's okay in your off hours. But when we go to the Hill to talk about mental health and suicide prevention, doesn't matter what your party affiliation is. It's really about you, your story. And I like what Dr. Murphy talks about. You can save money by making sure people get coordinated care. And that's what Lindsay spoke about this morning in terms of Medicaid for some people is a coordinated care. So it takes care of their physical and mental health. So we have to help the Congress see the way that it's not just wasteful spending, but it's very purposeful spending.
That's right. It's a real value. I'm doing a hearing on this in my oversight committee next week, I think the 21st, so you can catch that on C-SPAN too. I might also say I had a conversation with the president and vice president about this, and I asked him, and the vice president said he would do this. I said, you need to get the heads of all the mental health organizations together, you being one of them. I said, bring them to the cabinet room or bring them somewhere in the executive office building and simply say, tell me what I need to know. And the vice president said he'd be open to that. And of course, the president, I think he'd want to do that too. You know, he lost his brother to alcoholism, he says. And I don't know the full story, but they're very aware and very sensitive to this. And in the midst of all the other stuff out there in the media, you would never know it. But as like I said, it touches everybody. And you could tell when the president was talking about this, he paused and he says, yeah, this is important to me. So let's remember that too.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I think we're happy. Let's
Any questions?
stand and give Dr. Murphy a big round of applause.